immigration. I don't have a. There's too many people in this fucking country. But I think if you're going to focus on keeping people out, you're going to focus on the people who don't contribute to society. That's a no-brainer. And there's a specific group of over 4 million people that come into this country every year and don't contribute a fucking thing. And everyone knows who I'm talking about, but no one wants to say it because it's politically incorrect. But fuck that. You know who I'm talking about? Officer Bob. You know who I'm talking about. Who am I talking? Babies. That's who I'm talking about. Babies. They come out of your hole. They come into this country. They don't speak the language. They don't want to work. They just take and they cause a ruckus and they waste all of our natural resources. I say put the Border Patrol agent at the foot of your uterus. Anything comes out without a visa, you kick it back in the hole. What's your name? You're not on the list. Get back behind the velvet rope. The club is over full. We'll call you when we need you.
It's still so weird. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to Dixieland, the Proletariat. We're going to talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Make sure to like us on social media at Dixieland, the Proletariat, or Dixie Prole. If you want to give your wages to a bunch of rednecks, and subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/DixieProle. We got a lot of cool stuff to give you, including CDs, stickers, a cookbook, Discord server, Twitch stream, and exclusive episodes. We also have a Spotify playlist with some great artists you also check out, as well as our merch store. This podcast is brought to you by Contractional Monogamy, Therapy, Vaping, Living at Home, Modelo, Pushing People in Swamps, Tommy Cheating Death, and Governor Meemaw's Pride Month. Shout out to our new Patreon subscriber, Frank. Our monthly Patreon surplus goes to groups that are run by and or help marginalized people directly. As always, I'm Nelson with...
Hey, I'm Polly Macaroni.
I'm Tommy, and I would like to say that life begins at conception.
That's it. I quit. I quit, y'all.
Damn it, we just lost our legitimacy.
Well, I'm here too.
For how much longer, we don't know. How much longer she'll put up with us. And our guest this evening is...
Dr. Leah Torres, OBGYN at West Alabama Women's Center in Tuscaloosa, wondering why she's doing this.
I am too.
Our first blue check mark on Twitter.
Woo!
Yay.
Oh boy, you guys with the bars and the lowness. Come on now.
It's so low. It's so low. We have to trick people to come on sometimes, so we've totally tricked you. So
I feel duped. I really do.
You should. Yeah.
Dr. Leah is
totally
sitting here,
should.
very, very, professional looking, beautiful background full of books and everything. And here's all of us.
I was about to
Just
I think you're the first guest that's had like an actual bookshelf behind them.
Tommy's got some shelves over there. It's cool.
Books on there.
Look, these books ain't meant for reading, sweetheart.
what's the God of War special edition in the corner.
Hey, listen, that is a classic book. Let me tell you. It's right up there with the Iliad. I'm like, come on.
Tommy's Weeb collection.
Oh my God, the Weeb collection's the best.
It's for tobacco use only. Come on, guys.
Yeah, next week my background's just gonna be a fucking like a Google image of just a huge bookshelf now.
Oh yeah, everybody who's listening to this, like, you never really get to see Tyler's backgrounds, but today we have the Communist Party of China's like seal in the background for a few. Who was that guy with the high pants?
The high pants.
The high pants.
You don't remember he had him like pulled up to his nipples?
Igor.
Like Glenn Danzig. That was the background. Usually we get
Ed Grimley.
Oh no, the Danzig knockoff. Who was that, Tyler?
Igor.
Okay. Also, Tyler's name on Zoom is always "I hate Italians."
I wear my heart on my sleeve.
We all know who he's talking about.
Oh, do we want to talk about my meatball sub?
We all know that he hates
Oh,
Andrew
talk about
Cuomo.
Opening of the show. We've got to get it out of the way. What happened
is
with the
this?
Oh yeah,
meatballs?
what happened with these
So look,
meatballs, Tyler?
Today I was trying to I was feeling bad. I was like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't hate Italian. So I'm gonna go get me a meatball sub to try to, extend the olive branch. My fucking total, I shit you not, I got the screenshot, came up to $14.88. What kind of shit is that?
Oh,
For old meatballs?
Meatballs used to be the cheap food.
Yeah.
No,
That's,
$14.88. The
that
fucking
sub
white
was-
supremacist
that sub was trying to tell you something.
code. Nelson, do you know what that means? It's Italian.
Yeah,
So you
no,
gotta know
it's
what
not.
$14.88 means.
Fuck you. Look, we switched sides after we figured out we were going to lose. This is what Italians are good at, switching sides mid-battle. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
and they're also good at charging exactly $14.88 for a fucking meatball sub.
Okay, that is really fucked up. I'm not going to lie. You should have said you weren't going to eat it.
Wait, was this a chain place or was it
Yeah.
independent?
It was a chain place.
You went to
Where
Subway,
was it?
didn't you?
I
You
mean,
went
we
to
can say
Subway.
it.
You went to Subway, didn't you?
I went to Firehouse Subs.
Oh yeah.
That just makes it worse.
Firehouse just sounds racist.
It really does.
Not good.
It's really upsetting how fucking good the sandwiches are, though.
Yeah, it was
I dream of those
I was about to
sandwiches.
say,
Dr.
Lee
Leah
just-
left.
just
She was like, I
left.
can't fuck this.
Fuck this.
Bye, guys.
Why the fuck did I come on this podcast? It's like, Mia lied to me. Oh, wow. Anyway, well,
So yeah, anyways, fuck Italian.
oh my God. Anyway, Dr. Leah, how are you doing today? And what would you like to talk about?
Oh my gosh, those are two very loaded questions. I'm doing very well, thanks. It's very hot here and it's like living in the jungle, so that's great. That's my dog with his toy that I was trying to get rid of, so I'm sure that that's awesome. Hold on.
When animals attack.
We've already had to pause one recording a few
Oh my
weeks
God.
ago, and my dog vomited on the floor, and I had to run out of recording.
And now Tommy's got a kitten and Tyler's got kids. It's just crazy.
Good Lord. Okay, let's try this again. So, hi, I'm doing very well. It's very balmy here in Alabama. It's a lot like being outside and, living in water somehow. And everything grows all the time, doesn't stop growing. It's crazy. You can watch plants grow. You can sit there and be like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing it just grow out of the ground. It's insane. Always doing stuff.
It's a state pastime.
It's crazy. And then what do I want to talk about? You all here, I've met some very awesome people here in Alabama. And so what's up with your dingbats in the legislature and people who do like rulemaking and governing? They don't seem so awesome. So why are the awesome people not doing good things in the legislature? Because they're not in the legislature. Why is that?
Our state legislature is filled with failed small businessmen.
Well, that helps. Thanks.
Yeah, and we could do a whole episode on this. Long story short, gerrymandering, racism, and failed Republican politics.
I had an inkling there was some racism and a little bit of patriarchy mixed in with misogyny.
What? Where?
Yeah, no, everywhere I go, it's there. It's amazing. It's actually quite impressive now. And you're talking to somebody who lived and practiced in Utah. And I'm impressed by Alabama's being further back in time than even Utah. It's wow, it's striking.
You see, Mormonisms are cool with capitalism. So as long as capitalism can fuel something, they'll let it roll. Whereas,
True.
a lot more of the other like respectable Christian denominations, their capitalism is more like undercover, I guess.
Yeah, no, they're pretty blatant about their capitalism structure in their church goings. But it's been a rough entry into Alabama, but I am feeling good about the fact that I can see, quite frankly, how much I'd say how much healthcare is needed here and how much healthcare that needs to be delivered in a non-judgmental and open and accessible way. I've had quite a few patients already tell me their own little horror stories. They're horrific to me. They're hard for me to hear, but unfortunately to them, it's like the norm, which then makes it all the more disturbing to me. For example, maybe you all can explain, because I've heard this from several people and I still don't believe it. Apparently you need to, and clarify, because I'm sure I'm misunderstanding, because it can't be true the way I'm interpreting it. People need to apply to a doctor's office to get care. Is that a thing?
I had to pick a primary care physician. If they weren't accepting patients, I didn't get in. I don't know about like applying for, I don't know.
It's even like that with,
I
sorry, Nelson.
I only just got I'm sorry. I only just got health insurance like 2 years ago, and I'm 30. So
like I had a giant dental abscess 2 years ago, and I couldn't even get into the dentist. I had to go to the ER just to get fucking antibiotics.
Well, there's one thing getting into a doctor, but there's another thing about, hi, I am Susie Q and I need a doctor, so I'm going to go call this office and make an appointment. But instead of calling the office and making an appointment, what you have to do is you have to fill out an application before you can make the appointment. And then the doctor's office says, yeah, we'll take you as a patient and we'll call you for an appointment. Or the doctor's office says, no, we're not going to take you as a patient. Maybe this only happens with women, which would not be surprising. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't say anything for Alabama. When I had American healthcare, it was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. In the UK, that's just the way it's done. You have to apply to practices. If they don't have room on the patient roll, then you can't go to those practices. For example, my husband and I had a house closer in the center of town when I first moved over here. And 10 years ago, I've been living here for 12 years now. 10 years ago, we moved to our house a little further outside of town. And he has not been able to switch his practice because like where he goes. And he has ongoing care for chronic illness. So he can't switch his practice in the last 10 years. They haven't had any spaces open in our local clinics, but I don't know. That's what it's like in the UK, and everybody's just like, that's normal here. So
come on, y'all got doctors?
What?
You get healthcare? Y'all get healthcare over there?
Well, that's the thing, right? So like in the UK, they have the national health system, which is what we should have here. And that sort of makes sense there. But here I'm hearing stories about people who like apply to doctors, like as if it were a job. It's a foreign concept to me. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but people I've talked to are telling me I have to apply to this practice, and then if they accept me, I can make an appointment. And I'm just like, I don't understand what you're talking about, but apparently that's how things work here. And it makes me concerned, especially if you guys living in Alabama don't know this, then maybe it's just OBGYN practices. Like, I don't know.
I have heard that for people who don't have health insurance and they have to apply for certain things that you would be able to see a doctor at certain places. But I don't, like I said, I don't know about. I know they're shutting down rural hospitals because we didn't expand Medicaid. So like they have hospitals that like we have counties that don't have a hospital or like any sort of anything, urgent care, anything.
You also have counties that shouldn't have a hospital. That's another story. Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I've always heard, because I just now got health insurance, that like if you got anything wrong, you don't have health insurance, the only thing to do is literally just go to the fucking ER and just dodge that fucking bill if you can't pay it.
But that's the thing, is like we tried to stop that from happening back in the 90s when we introduced HMOs, which was a disaster. I don't think we should talk about our healthcare system necessarily because people will fall asleep because it's awful and it needs to be burned to the ground and rebuilt as something new because it's just not, it doesn't work. Well, it works how it was designed to. So take that as you will. But, people should have the ability to call a doctor's office and say, I need to see a doctor. And they should be able to say, we have an opening on this date. And that should be how it works, but it doesn't. So what I'm understanding is that here people will say, like offices will say, fill out an application. We will then decide whether or not, and between the lines you read, if we like your insurance enough, we'll decide if we want you to join our practice as a patient. And if not, good luck. And no, Alabama has not expanded Medicaid. So you've got a lot of people uninsured. You've got a lot of people also who are basically uninsured because their deductibles are like $7,000. And like someone like me, for example, I'm never going to meet a $7,000 deductible. So I'm going to be paying for my healthcare out of pocket the whole year anyway. So you've got that aspect that's happening here too. And it's not helpful. So people can't afford to go to the doctor for the stuff that they need to go for because their insurance isn't covering it because of their high deductible. And so they don't go to the doctor until they're really, really sick. And then they're in the ER. And then they've got an exorbitant bill that they can't pay because the ER costs so much. And it shouldn't cost that much, but it does because America. Sorry, I ranted.
You're preaching to the choir. My deductible is $5,000.
See, that's what I'm talking about. And I have people telling me that that's what their deductible is. And why am I staring at Mike Pence?
Because that is the American way.
Tommy.
Mr. Vice President, where's your wife? Your wife's supposed to be in the room with you.
I can't be in the same room with a woman without my wife present.
Yeah, I bet. Oh my God.
Just out of curiosity, how long have you been working in Alabama?
Oh, that's a very interesting question that I don't know how to answer accurately. Let's see. So I moved here at the end of July and started practice at the beginning of August of 2020. And at the end of August of 2020, the state decided to revoke my temporary license and deny my permanent license for allegations of fraud. And then I wasn't able to work because I didn't have a license in Alabama. So that makes it hard to earn money. So
Amen.
we went through a very expensive attorney process, and there was a hearing. And at the hearing, the Medical Licensing Commission, MLC, I don't know what it is, stands for. Anyway, Medical Licensing Commission ruled that there was insufficient evidence to support the allegations of fraud, and then ordered that my license be issued, ordered the Alabama Board of Medical Examiners to issue me a license to practice medicine in the state. And so that was in December/January. And then I finally was issued said license at the end of March. So then I began to practice medicine again at the end of March. So from the 26 glorious days in August of 2020 plus March 24th onward, that's been my practice of medicine in Alabama. And I have learned so much in those few interrupted months. I am very concerned about people's well-being in this state. I'm very concerned that there's not the access to health care that we deserve and need. And I feel that a lot of that has to do with the system, but also a lot of that has to do with bad players in the system. We are 45th in rank in healthcare outcomes in the state of Alabama, and I have a lot of people's stories that I can point to as to why that is, just in the short time that I've been practicing here. So it has been very eye-opening and very concerning, and I think that the people of Alabama deserve better. And I'm sure that I'm not alone in that, and it is going to take a complete overhaul of the system in order to accomplish that, let alone expanding Medicaid, which our quote unquote, and I use scare quotes here, pro-life governorship doesn't seem to want to do, which is antithetic to the actual healthcare outcomes of the people in this state.
I think that flows into what I was going to ask next is like, what's the state of reproductive health care, I guess, in Alabama? And like, is it reflective of the nation as a whole? Like, are we backsliding as a nation, really?
Reproductive health care, from what I gather, is not up to date, for one thing. You've got other practitioners not providing evidence-based health care. And I know that because of speaking to them directly, as well as taking care of their patients who come to me for healthcare. So there's a lot of things that aren't up to date. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So people, for example, aren't getting the contraception care that they need because of either lack of education of the healthcare provider or lack of interest by the healthcare provider. Anyway, people are being told things like, for example, oh, you have a gallbladder problem, so you can't take birth control pills. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. Birth control pills are perfectly fine in someone who has gallbladder issues. So that's just one example of several that I've run into. So anecdotally, I can tell you that reproductive health care is not up to date here, and I think the access is certainly lacking, and you can see that reflected in the maternal mortality rate.
More personal question. What made you want to become a doctor? Like, what made you want to get into the healthcare field?
Money, duh. No.
Awesome. That's what I figured. Everyone's in it for the money.
I mean, I can remember in high school, being interested in science and thinking that was fascinating. And then in college, I always knew that I was medical school bound, but I didn't really understand, what channels. I was always interested in biology and chemistry and helping people. So like naturally, I gravitated toward medicine and medical school. And in college, I took a women's studies course, because that's what you do when you're in a liberal college in the North. You take a women's studies course. And I learned about a study that was done on uterine cancer, and they studied 3,000 men for uterine cancer study research. And I decided, so not only medical school, but also OBGYN, because that's insanity. And why are we studying uterine cancer on folks who don't have uteruses? That doesn't seem right. Women's health is clearly not represented well in medical research, and I want to change that. So I went to medical school and decided I was going to be an OBGYN.
So let me get this straight before we have anybody else jump on this. They were studying uterine cancer in cis men who have no uteruses, and it has nothing to do with trans men who might have uteruses or anything like that. It's cis men studying for uterine cancer.
What the fuck?
This was published in, I can't remember if it was the Lancet or JAMA, a well-known journal. This was not like hidden somewhere in the depths of academia. No, this was, I would have to pull it up now, but you can find it, and it's just sad. I mean, yes. So it was clear to me that women's health, was being underrepresented, and that was, in the late 90s, early noughts, and we haven't made much progress, sadly. So that's not encouraging. But here I am trying to do the change from within, and there are folks that don't want me to do that, so they try and shut me down.
I was going to say why. I was going to say why Utah, and I believe that there was a story that you told. Oh, no,
That kind of said, because I wanted to ask why Alabama. So I guess I have why Utah and why
Yeah,
Alabama.
let's start Utah. Why Utah?
Okay, so funny
The
story.
Alabama of the West.
So medical training, medical training is a lot like the draft in the military. So when you graduate medical school, you apply to residency programs, and residency programs interview all sorts of medical students. And then the medical student puts in there, I want to go to this program number 1 and this program number 2, and you rank your programs. And then programs do the same thing. I want this medical student and I want this medical student. And then all of that data gets put into a computer, and an algorithm says, da, 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 medical student person over here, you go to this program. And medical student over here, you go to that program. So that happens also in fellowship. So I went from Chicago for medical school to Philadelphia for residency. And then from Philadelphia, I applied for the Family Planning Fellowship. And that is a fellowship that focuses on medically complicated contraception, research as well, clinical research. I earned a clinical research degree, as well as abortion care. And from Philadelphia, they said, guess what? You're going to go to Salt Lake City, Utah to learn about abortion. I said, okay, that makes all the sense in the world. Let's do that. So I did. So I matched. It's called the match. So I matched in Salt Lake City at the University of Utah, and I spent 2 years there doing fellowship in family planning, where I earned a master's in clinical research and completed the family planning fellowship and got all of my skills in abortion care and complicated contraception care. And then I graduated fellowship, went out into the real world, as it were, and none of my employers would let me do abortions until Alabama. And then I came here.
I've never heard that uttered in a sentence ever before. Is to do Alabama until to do abortions until I came to Alabama. Like the sentence doesn't structurally make sense. Like it doesn't. It doesn't make sense at all.
You're right. None of this makes sense.
No, but there was a story that you told me, and I think Tommy might have been there, but about when you took you kind of blew up on Twitter a bit when you took a plane on the plane to Australia. Do you mind telling that story? It was actually kind of fun.
Oh, Twittergate of 2018?
Yeah.
That's complicated, but we'll get into it a little bit. So I am, and this is not according to me, this is according to Live Action and Life Sites. I'm a bit notorious on the Twitter for my audacity of defending reproductive health care and access to abortion. How dare I? So in 2018, I was responding sometimes like I do in a, are you kidding me with this nonsense sort of tone, to someone who was trying to promote disinformation about abortions. And that got me into an onslaught of hot water, because what I posted was grossly misinterpreted, but also I believe and contend in my lawsuit that I filed that resulted in a settlement, intentionally misinterpreted to exaggerate and say that I was performing illegal abortions. So that has never been the case. The social media world, you can post something, and then if you want it to be taken out of context, it's easy for someone to do. And that's what sort of these right-wing media outlets did, was they crafted an interpretation of my post that was clearly false, but didn't matter because nobody believes in facts anyway. So people called my place of work. They threatened bomb threats. They threatened my life. I had death threats. I had gotten involved, I called the FBI and opened a case for help because I was concerned for my personal safety. And that was all because of a social media fallout. And I ended up leaving my place of work because there were safety concerns. I mean, they were concerned about their safety. They had been doxxed by these media outlets, and I can't blame them for being concerned about their safety. I was concerned about my safety. So we parted ways, and then I left the state, and it was just this huge upheaval in my life that people don't understand. When you fail to respect what is the truth versus what you want to believe and what you want to promote, that actually affects real people in real lives. So real people in real lives were affected because of that whole thing. And not just mine, but my colleagues, my patients. My patients to this day are upset that I left the state, basically. I had patients following me from city to city, and then, they couldn't follow me beyond state lines. So lives are upheaved when propaganda is used maliciously. And when I say propaganda, I mean propaganda. I mean taking things out of context intentionally and using them to be malicious and to be awful to someone else in order to make your own self feel good, but also to destroy someone else's life, because that will make your own self feel good. It's a thing that I don't really understand, but that's what happened. And it was like, to this day, I have a hard time talking about it, because it was so I just cannot believe that people would go to such lengths to destroy a complete stranger's life based on nothing more than what they wanted to believe. So yeah, that's going to be fun for your listeners.
It's like the same people that rail against cancel culture are canceling people. Isn't that ironic?
Well, the same people who rail against cancel culture are the ones who are being ignored and being told that they aren't worthy of being listened to, because what they're spouting is lies and bigotry. So of course they're going to be upset about being canceled, because I'm not required to listen to somebody else's nonsense. And so I'm not going to listen to your nonsense. And so that's why they're upset. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, cancel culture. Well, yeah, but stop spewing nonsense and you won't be ignored. That's all it is.
So I guess that brings us to speaking of right wingers, the great state of Alabama. So I guess my next question, and probably the questions that our listeners want to know, are like, what are the obstacles facing you and other doctors that want to perform abortions and practice reproductive health care that's not in the dark ages in Alabama? Like, what are the obstacles that the right wingers and our government have put in place to hurt you?
I mean, look at all the laws, right? So any laws that prohibit people from accessing healthcare, that's an obstacle. All of the stigma is an obstacle. The stigma that's put on this aspect of healthcare specifically is an obstacle. And so I can't just call someone in the city and say, hey, fellow OBGYN, I'm another fellow OBGYN, and I have a patient that I would like to consult you with. I am effectively a pariah because I provide abortion care, because of the stigma. And that's the reality. And it is what it is, but let's remember that abortion is healthcare, and it will be healthcare until our maternal mortality rate is 0. And so that's just physiologic, scientific, chemical, biological fact. You can believe what you want. I believe at the beginning of the podcast, someone named Tommy said something about life starting at conception. Well, great. You want to define life? Define life. You want to define conception? Define conception. But those are all philosophical issues. I'm talking about the science and the physiology behind what happens when someone is pregnant. There are physiologic changes that occur. And so those changes that occur naturally incur risks to health and to life. And someone should be able to choose whether or not to take those risks. that is basic human autonomy. No one forces anyone to get in a vehicle and drive. No one forces anyone to walk out their door, yet people do that. But they do that knowing that there are risks involved with any action that they take. And so the fact that people just cannot even grasp that abortion is healthcare is one issue. And another issue is that healthcare is a human right. And you may disagree with that, but think about it. Healthcare is as basic as clean water. Healthcare is as basic as vaccines. Healthcare is as basic as I need an antibiotic because I have an infection. That's science, that's healthcare. And so you've got people pushing back against abortion who are happily going to their doctor to get antibiotics and treatment for the flu and treatment for their appendix bursting, but they're not seeing how healthcare in pregnancy is a thing. And that's just, I don't understand it, but here we are. So a very basic obstacle, I think, is the fact that people don't recognize abortion as healthcare because the political propaganda has been a very effective machine.
Yeah. The first thing that popped in my mind is when I hear like conservatives and reactionaries talk about it, the first thing they try to say, like in their mind, it seems like it's voluntary. Like they didn't choose to get, like, for instance, you said like appendix busting and the flu and whatnot. They look at that as like, you know, they got that, but like always in their mind, pregnancy is voluntary. They don't ever think of like it. They think of it as like as not healthcare in that way. And
well,
I never understood that. I was just like,
let's break that down though, because you make a good point. Because people make the argument that if you have sex and you get pregnant, then that's what you chose to get pregnant. Consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. I think we can all understand that. It's very basic. And also, if having sex meant that you can't then be upset about being pregnant, or you can't, like, we wouldn't have infertility doctors if pregnancy were a choice. If people could will themselves pregnant, we wouldn't have infertility as an entire subspecialty and field. We wouldn't have people having miscarriages. We wouldn't have people needing abortions. We wouldn't have people needing these different aspects of medical care if pregnancy were actually able to be willed. So that's just, again, the water is wet. I mean, you can't, you can argue whatever philosophy you want, but at the end of the day, facts are facts, and you can accept them or deny them.
I guess another question is, because we all live in the deep South, right? Or we have reactionary conservative family members. We've heard the myths, we've heard like their talking points, and they believe them as fact because for whatever reason. So like, what can we do to combat like these facts? Wow, what can we do to combat their bullshit? I guess is what I'm saying. Because I've talked to you, Tom and I've talked to you privately. Mia's been on the show a number of times. Like, they keep perpetuating these lies and myths about abortion, and they'll throw out terms like late term abortion or partial birth abortion, and like, you know, all this stuff. So I guess like someone as a medical professional, what can we do, and like what are the actual facts when it comes to abortion? Because Tommy and I went to Catholic school, so you can only imagine like the bullshit that we heard. So
I went to Catholic school.
Hell yeah. What no,
Survivor.
boo.
Yeah.
Catholic power.
I mean, what? So
God's about to kill us.
that, there was a God who impregnated a woman with himself. Okay, I'm 7, and that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, no. What do you do? I mean,
he also did it without consent. I want to put that out there.
Also true. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn, I didn't even think about that.
Damn, Tyler, of all people, coming in with the
all that time in Catholic school, and y'all didn't even think about that.
I didn't think about that, dude.
I was zoning out half the time.
Because Catholic school also teaches you that women don't get consent. That's not a thing. I mean, come on.
I actually don't know what sex is. I heard you can get pregnant by hugging someone or holding their hands. So
Yeah,
Using the same toilet.
Oh yeah,
You don't know what
Sure.
you
That's
don't know what
cool.
sex is because you play folk punk. That's why.
Wow. God damn.
No, it's because I have a podcast.
At school dances, they told us you had to leave room.
That's a
for the
lie.
Holy Spirit.
I have a podcast and I got 4 kids. So
Well, maybe someday we can figure out this mystery of how children are made. There are people who are going to be open to learning, and there are people who are going to hang their own personal identity on what they believe. And if you are talking to somebody who has their identity tied to what they believe, I doubt that you're going to be able to reach them. But what I do is I take sort of I think it's the Socratic method where this is a very medical training thing. So it's sort of the idea of, let me see if I can get you there. So I'll ask questions to them that they have to then answer, and then ask another question based on that response. So, okay, so pregnancy is voluntary. So why do people need infertility treatment, right? So someone had sex and they got pregnant, but they didn't, will that to happen. Well, yes, they did, because they had sex. Okay, but there are people who have sex who can't get pregnant. So what about those people? Well, that's because it's God's will. Okay, but then God's will, there are people who also have abortions. So isn't that also God's will? So you can ask the questions. If you're asking the questions, there's another point where at some point it's going to conflict with what they already said. So that's for those folks who tie their identity to their beliefs, where any question in their belief is a question to their own identity, and they cannot fathom having any sort of other identity. I take great pride in knowing that I am not the same person that I was even 10 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago, I was in what, 10 years ago was 2011. So I was in residency, and I had certain ideas about abortion care that I no longer hold because I grew as a person. I used to think, but somebody who has 10 abortions, that's like too many abortions. And now I say, well, if they had 10 abortions, they must have needed 10 abortions. So I take pride in that growth. And there are people who just won't want to grow. They won't want to make themselves a better person for some reason. And I don't understand this myself. They will want to stay the same person that they were 10 years ago, which I would be not okay with. Like, I don't want to be the same person I was when I was 20 or 30. Like, that person didn't know a whole lot, and now I know more. And I think I've grown for the better. So you'll always have that. But I think that it comes down to the fact that pregnancy is a condition that involves someone who is a person with a body undergoing physiologic changes because of the pregnancy developing inside them. And some people will say, but that's a person. Well, if it's a person, then why do I need informed consent to do a C-section on someone? Like, if that's a person in there, why are we not collecting taxes from that person, or the deductible, or whatever the hell? Why aren't we, treating that person as a dependent? Why are we not treating that person as needing child support? Why are we not, what it comes down to is there's a pregnant person and there's a pregnancy, and the pregnant person is greater than the pregnancy. That is fact, because anything that is inside of me needs my ongoing consent to be there, for one thing, especially if it's going to use my resources, my oxygen, my lungs, my heart pumping, my kidneys filtering, my liver cleaning. If you're going to use my resources, you need my ongoing consent for that. So people want to equate a fetus or a pregnancy with the pregnant person, and by sheer scientific, physiologic reality fact that is not true. And therefore, the pregnant person is always going to be greater than their pregnancy. We can't do fetal surgery without consent from the pregnant person to do fetal surgery, right? We can't do a C-section on someone to save that fetus's life without that pregnant person's consent. I've had that happen. I've had to watch a baby die in utero because the pregnant person would not consent to an emergency C-section to save the baby's life. And that's hard. But at the end of the day, my patient is the pregnant person and the fetus, but I have to go by what the pregnant person says because they're the ones in control. It's their body that's allowing that fetus to exist and grow and develop. So they are therefore greater always.
So it sounds like a landlord has like 10 times more right than a pregnant woman.
Dead people have more rights than pregnant women.
Yeah. Like you can evict someone if you're a landlord, but like if you're pregnant and you don't want the fucking child, they pain in the goddamn ass to, well, not the child, the growing, whatever they want to call it.
The pregnancy. I mean, I say pregnancy. People get on me all like, it's a baby. It's like, it's whatever you want to call it, but it's just easier to call it a pregnancy because sometimes it's an embryo, sometimes it's a zygote, sometimes it's a fetus. It's a pregnancy.
Sometimes it's a baby.
Sometimes it's a baby. Sometimes it's an unborn child. No, if it's an unborn child, then we are undead people and we're all zombies. So.
Fuck, I knew it. I knew it.
Yep.
I knew it.
There you go. I'm sorry to break it to you, but we're all the Walking Dead.
God
Yeah.
damn it. We're all
it's only a baby if you want it. Then if it's not, it's just a fucking burden. And you should.
Listen, people, I've known OBGYNs who've called their pregnancy a fetus. Like they're like the fetus this, the fetus that. People get to decide what their pregnancy means to them. It's not up to the rest of us. It's not up to me as their doctor. It's not up to their partner. The pregnant person gets to decide what that pregnancy means to them and nobody else. That's what makes me a little bit crazy, is that you can decide what it means to you, but you can't decide what it means for anyone else or to anyone else. I mean, that's just common sense.
Well, also, you got to take into consideration how Republicans feel.
No, I don't care.
What you said, it instantly reminded me of something that I learned frustratingly recently, that dead people do in fact have more consent over what happens to their body than pregnant people do, because a will and testament is almost unbreakable as to what they want done with a body. Also, you can't harvest organs. You can't harvest what a doctor or somebody whose relative is dying. You can't go in and say, well, this dead person isn't using their liver anymore, therefore, we can just harvest it. That corpse has the right to not be desecrated like that. Frustrating.
It's unimaginably cruel that people do not have sovereignty over their own bodies while living. It doesn't even, and they have sovereignty while dead. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
I really wish that sometimes we could get like a visual thing, because while that was going on, Tyler was measuring his bicep and Tommy was actively trying to destroy his camera with a red light laser.
I was wondering what that was. Thank God I'm not epileptic, Tommy.
Yes, Tommy. Yes, Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy.
I know that you have a kitten there,
God,
but please keep the laser
Tommy.
out of the camera.
You should always, Tommy. That's so Tommy.
So Tommy.
Hey, my biceps are at 16 inches now, though. So,
oh my God!
Without the help of PEDs,
I really don't know why any of y'all three are talking, because none of you can hold a pregnancy. One person is a medical, as a medical person, and another person can hold a pregnancy, and y'all three are talking in here. Really, it should just be the two of us.
You don't know my body. You don't know what I can do. Okay.
All right, Tommy.
Okay, I'm not going to find out either.
Hey,
I'm just trying to ask questions, so there's not any dead air.
Do you hear these people? Do you hear them? As soon as I bring it up, all of them want to argue.
You can't spell Dixieland of the Proletariat without dicks.
Oh my God.
I'm leaving. I am leaving this goddamn show.
I'm sorry, Kyle.
I'm just trying. I do have a question because I keep hearing like when I'm around, we're all going to be obviously around conservatives. They say like the dumbest shit. It's like these myths that they perpetuate, and I guess like I had one time someone was like, "Do you know that the Democrats want you to be able to go in like the day before your pregnancy and they'll like take the baby out and kill it, and that's an abortion?" I'm just like, "What the fuck are y'all talking about?"
Well,
So like,
cite your source.
Yeah. I guess like what are some crazy myths that you've heard that you can debunk for us and our listeners?
Oh my God.
It's just like,
Well, first of all, no one's going through an entire. Do you know how hard pregnancy is? Pregnancy is hard. It is very difficult. You have a whole lot of mess and pain, and nobody's allowed to talk about it because if you complain about being pregnant, our society tells you that you're a bad person. But guess what? Being pregnant is awful. And there are pregnant people and people who have been pregnant before who will tell you the exact same thing. So there's no one going through 10 months of pregnancy. Yes, I said 10 months because it's 40 weeks. 10 months of pregnancy and then deciding, you know what? Just kidding. Let's just not do this. Like that is not happening. And if it is, you point me in their direction because I guarantee you're making that up. So step number one. Step number two, if it is happening, there's something very, very wrong there. And I mean that to continue with a pregnancy and a birth situation would mean suffering for either the newborn and or the parent. And that the abortion is therefore done to avoid said suffering. And so as human beings and humanitarians that we all want to be, we want to avoid suffering, right? So any of those stories are either a lie or based on the fact that someone is trying to avoid an incredibly impossible situation of suffering, which I think is hard to argue. And also, I would question these people who pretend that these situations are happening. I would ask them how they feel about, the death penalty. Because chances are they're okay with the death penalty because not innocent. However, who made us the arbiters of life and death? I don't believe in the death penalty. I don't think any of us have that power. So there's an interesting little twist for you because I cannot understand how someone can say, you have to suffer and give birth to this baby, regardless of the outcome, because that's what you have to do. And yet I'm okay with just, I decide that person's guilty of something and so they deserve to die. Like it just doesn't make sense. So chances are there are things that are they don't match up, right? So people having abortion care, people seeking abortion care, they need an abortion. There's no alternative to being pregnant when you don't want to be pregnant. If you're pregnant and you don't want to be, the solution is an abortion. Adoption is an alternative to parenting. Abortion is an alternative to pregnancy. Parenting and pregnancy are very different things. And so to force someone to remain pregnant when they don't want to remain pregnant and undergo those risks of health and life, that's reproductive coercion. And so what we have in Alabama is government-sanctioned reproductive coercion. What's happening in Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana and all across the South is reproductive coercion by definition. If you do not allow someone to decide their reproductive outcomes, that's coercion. I don't get to tell people that they shouldn't have a fifth or sixth or seventh child because it's a C-section and be risky. I don't get to make those decisions for people. So why does the government?
My theory on all this, and which doesn't mind a hell of a bean, but I think it's just like the fucking old white dudes who are making laws are just trying to hold on to any sentiment that women are property.
Well, there is that, but I'll tell you what, it's not only that women are property. I wish it were more complicated. I wish it were like this complex thing that we just can't be. It's not complicated. It's money and power. Their base throws money at them for keeping them in power. And what I mean by that is anything that is a tool of the patriarchy has power. And so to keep yourself in power, you feed the patriarchy. And so that's how that happens. It's not, I wish it were more complex. It's not rocket science. Those who benefit from this system are the ones voting for the system. Because they remain in power, they remain beneficial. Cis men don't have anything to worry about with this system. They get to keep their power. And so when their, person in the legislature says, we're going to do this, and they're like, oh yeah, that keeps me in power. I'm going to vote for you and I'm going to send you all my money. They don't care because they then benefit. There's a benefit, right? So it's all about follow the money, follow the power. That's all it is.
I mean, even though reproductive care, especially with a wider understanding of what gender and sex is these days, that it's not just women who can get pregnant, it's not just women who have uteruses or ovaries or anything like that. However, it is still mostly those reasonings that end up keeping that power. It's because pregnancy is associated with women and women are to be controlled in these situations.
Anyone who doesn't conform to the cis hetero norm is subject to oppression.
Right.
So trans men can get pregnant and they are no more powerful, even being men, than cis women. Like, it's all about the control and the oppression and the patriarchy. So there's racism and misogyny, and all of that bigotry empowers those who are in a position of power, mainly cishet men. So
you can
men,
see,
right?
You can see kind of an offshoot of that, and that trans people who wish to receive hormone therapy they have such a hard time getting to that point because they're pushing back against that established system of cisness, hetness, of all these things, where it would almost seem like receiving hormone therapy has no connection to something like reproductive care. However, it really does, because it's kind of the same reasoning that keeps them in such difficulty receiving the care that they want, that they need. That
Absolutely. It's a basis of control. I'm going to deny you what you need because I want to control you. I'm going to deny you what you need because my base gives me money when I do that. And so consider that gender is an arbitrary system that we made up. I mean, anybody who's watched Star Trek: The Next Generation can understand that it goes beyond boxes to be checked. I mean, we've held fast onto these boxes that we need to check. I am white. I am cis. I am heterosexual, but like, am I? I don't know. What does that even mean? Like, sexuality is so complex. We are human beings. We do not fit into checkboxes. By the very complexity of our DNA, we do not fit into checkboxes. And so the fact that people have to hold on so tightly to these checkboxes is, in and of itself, a tool of that which is in power and control. If you are in power and control, you want to control the masses, make them afraid to be an outsider, make them afraid to go outside of that checkbox. And that's how you maintain control of the masses. It's not good. Anybody, am I the only one who read 1984? Like, it's not a new concept. And so people hold tight to these things. And I just can't abide anymore. I cannot be bothered by someone who says, I am this and I'm that. I'm like, really? That's it? That's all you are? Like, I feel like you aren't giving yourself enough credit. Like, can't you be more than that? like, if you want to put me in a box, I guess I'm a cishet white female who was adopted at a very young age. I mean, I was an infant, but that doesn't mean my parents aren't my parents, because my parents are my parents, even though they didn't genetically create me. And so why do we hold so tightly to, I mean, that's the question I would be asking. Why do we hold so tightly to straight, bi, gay? Those are the only things that make sense. Well, no, that's not the only thing that makes sense. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, like, well, if your mom's Asian and your dad's, from Africa, then what, like, I mean, can you be just not either of those, or do you have to be both, or do you have to be all of this mixture of stuff? Like, why don't we just have people are people? I mean, songs have been created about that. Like, why do we have to check all these boxes? And people are so holding on to these boxes because we've been made afraid of veering outside of these check boxes, and that is the control that they have over us. And I just won't do it anymore. What did I do? Did I break you all? I'm sorry.
No, nothing.
No,
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 I
no.
mean, no. I just for like the very end when you're like, well, one you referenced 1984, and two when you hear that's the power in the check boxes. All I heard was like I picture just Alex Jones saying that too, but like you're saying it in like such a positive way, but like he would say it in like such a shitty negative way. I don't know. That was just for some reason that popped
Alex
in my head.
Jones, because I will never come on this podcast again.
Shut up, Nelson. I've got a question
I have the documents.
for the doc and for Kai. What is versus like how we have it in America? What are abortion laws like in the UK? I just don't know.
As far as I know, it is fairly available on demand. I don't know very much about what it actually, like, if there are constraints, like in the States when they decided to add in like fetal heartbeat bills and things like that. I don't know if there's any of those kind of arbitrary constraints on it. However, what I do know a lot more about is that people who require abortions from Ireland and Northern Ireland will regularly have to come to England, usually come to the UK at least, to access abortion care, because it's still not, as far as I know, it's still not available in Ireland. And that has a lot to do with Catholicism still being very, strong, very strong there. But I've been tangentially involved with at least one organization that would have to fundraise to be able to transport these people over to the UK. And what that sounds so easy that it's like an hour plane ride and you get your care done and then you can go back home. But the problem is that if you have no money, how do you get the ferry ride? How do you get the plane ride? When it came to the pandemic, what kind of transportation did you have available to you? Because a lot of our borders were closed, or it was much more difficult to get that kind of transportation. And then there's also the issue of, if most people are aware that if you go to a doctor, in the best case scenario, you're going to a doctor that's in your town. You're probably relatively close to home, to everything that you need. Imagine having to go to another country, hours away on international travel to receive your care on no money, and having to deal with after effects, possibly in a hotel room, alone, without your family or without a partner or friends there when you are recovering from these kinds of things. And that's a horrible situation to be in. I couldn't imagine, for people for whom an abortion would be an emotional thing, because there are people who wouldn't feel emotional turmoil over it. But for people for whom an abortion would be an emotional thing, could you imagine, having to go through an international airport and fly for an hour and then deal with this and then deal with the after effects alone emotionally, because the government in your home country refuses to allow you to access that care. I mean, that's something that's becoming a reality in the States and has been a reality for a lot of people in the States because their abortion care has been so far away or exorbitantly expensive or something like that. But it's hard to imagine that in Europe, which is supposed to be quote unquote so much better with our nationalized healthcare, that's still happening over here. So that's what I know.
And to your point, I mean, here it would be like, imagine having to go to Canada or Mexico. And I know I've taken care of people who went to Mexico, and then I've had to like take care of them after because something happened after they came back to the States. So, I mean, it's a thing. Like that's what I would say to, US citizens, imagining what it would be like. That's exactly what it would be like. Get to Canada or get to Mexico, because in the United States, you can't get it anymore because it's illegal. Ireland did pass, the legality of abortion, but that does, as we know in the United States, that does not mean it's accessible. So Roe v. Wade said abortion has to be legal federally, but since Roe v. Wade became a SCOTUS ruling, every state has decided that they're either going to make abortion accessible or not accessible, and many states made it not accessible. So just because it's legal doesn't mean it's accessible. Those are not synonymous, as Ireland, I'm sure, is understanding, especially for so long. I can't imagine they have any doctors trained there, or they must be like having people maybe come in to Ireland who are trained, because it used to legit until 2 years ago or something?
Very, very recently. if I remember correctly.
2018.
Right. It was illegal. So
just to add on top of that, kind of what the catalyst was the death of a pregnant person. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Savita Halappanaar, I think that was her last name, Halappanaar case. I think this was around 2012 or something like that. But Savita Halappanaar was pregnant, came to a Catholic-run hospital in Ireland.
She was in Ireland.
Period. Yes. So she came to this hospital where she was in a medical emergency that would have required an abortion, as far as I'm aware, and the hospital refused to do one, and she ended up dying.
Yes.
Because of that medical emergency. And so that was within the last 10 years that happened, and then that kind of forced the repeal of the law, but it's still that issue of, do people have access? And the same thing is happening in Poland. I don't know if anybody's heard, but in Poland, they've had massive protests because of there's other things, but a great part of it is the medical mistreatment of women, that women and people who need that kind of reproductive health care cannot access it there, again, because it is a heavily Catholic country where the laws prohibit a lot of it.
Yep, and we are headed in that direction. I know people don't want to think that and don't want to believe that, but we are already seeing it in our states that are very restrictive. We already have people dying needlessly from lack of abortion care. I was in Philadelphia in residency. Someone who had initially tried to get an abortion and could not get an abortion died in giving birth. So tell me how that's okay, So Savita's case is absolutely a case of failed medical intervention. She had an infection, an in utero infection, which requires treatment. Treatment includes two things. 1, a D&E. 2, antibiotics. She received one of those 2 interventions and she died because she didn't receive her full medical treatment because doctors were afraid of being arrested. And at that point, when you've got a doctor deciding between their own life and the patient's life, that's what it came down to. And that's an impossible choice. And so we are getting to that point here because we have stigmatized abortion care so much that there are doctors who will not do it to save somebody's life, even though that's what they need. They won't. I've had patients turned away from hospitals because they've had an abortion. That's not okay. People can die from that. People can die from being denied health care because of political ideology. That's truth, and that's fact, and that's happening now in 2021 with our current administration. Like that's not hyperbole. That's fact. And so we have to value people who make people. I mean, that's what it, I mean, you know, people always ask me, what do you think, you know, all this stems from? I mean, I honestly, I think it comes from once upon a time, abortion used to be no big deal. Abortion used to be, oh, you don't want a fifth kid? That makes total sense. Of course you had an abortion. No problem. That used to be how it was. And then somewhere along the way, it got politicized. It got religiosity and what have you. And it became evident that, oh, one portion of the population has this immense power with the ability to make more people. We have to control that. And in order to control that, let's make sure that we know who, when, where, and how they make people. So let's shame sexuality. Let's shame abortion. Let's shame extramarital sex. Let's shame all of these. Let's shame LGBTQ people. Let's shame anything that doesn't result in a unified marital procreative engagement in sexual intercourse so that we can control those who are able to make more people. Because people are how we have our armies. People are how we have our technology. People are how we have our economic growth. I mean, it can be boiled down to very simplistic ideologies, and it comes down to controlling those who can make people, because only a certain portion of the population can do that.
So we're coming. We've gone longer than we normally do, but there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of good information.
And I'm not done, Nelson.
Yeah, and I just wanted to give a small tip for like the cis dudes who are anti-choice. The number one thing you can do to fight abortions is to stay home and not fuck.
Or get a vasectomy.
Yes. Just genital mutilation. Just nonstop genital mutilation. That's how you stop abortion.
People with the external testicles, with external genitalia, can go in for an outpatient procedure to just go in and get it snipped and you're fine. Whereas if somebody who has internal genitalia, as in ovaries, you have to go, it's a major medical thing. And your doctor can just say, no, you can't have it because maybe your future husband wants kids.
No, I've been looking at the birth control pill for men that they're studying right now. And like from a pharmacology standpoint, this shit, like it boosts testosterone and shit. So like,
oh, we don't need any more testosterone. Listen, we do not need any more testosterone.
Look, all of it.
I'm speaking from a gym standpoint.
All of it is moot. I'm
going to take the pill. I'm going to take the pill.
I would take it too.
From a gym standpoint, like more testosterone, more muscle building, yeah, that'd be tight.
Studies have shown with the toxins that we introduce to our bodies, and the BPA's and the plastics and all the toxins and the waste and whatever, humans will lose the ability to naturally reproduce by 2040. So I'm just going to hold out.
Thanks, Nelson.
What? You're gonna have to find a new profession.
And can I be clear? So like everybody doesn't try to cancel me or anything. I'm not talking about testosterone from an ego standpoint. I'm talking about it from a pure just muscle building standpoint. I'm a fan of it.
Ego or nothing, we don't need any more testosterone in this world. Sorry, I'm speaking as a feminist.
I think
bunch of cows running around punching holes
respect
through
your
drywall.
The drywall industry needs testosterone.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. All of it.
Can I just interject though, because I want to just Tyler's statement just made me think, like, a shout out to cis men who actually do speak up against the patriarchy, because I don't like the term no uterus, no opinion. I don't like that, because guess what, folks? Here's the truth. The civil rights movement needed white people telling other white people, stop that, that's racist. The LGBTQ movement needed heterosexual people to tell other heterosexual people, hey, that's homophobic, stop it. So the feminist movement needs the cis men out there to be like, hey, that's misogynist. Hey, that's racist. Hey, that's whatever. We need that to be in a fuller, more complete feminist society. So I don't subscribe to no uterus, no opinion, as long as your opinion is that people have autonomy over their own bodies.
I guess my last question is what's the future hold? Like, what do you think is going to happen? As a professional, as a doctor?
Well, we're destroying our planet, so it's not going to matter. Also, let's remind ourselves that we're not talking about all of the climate change awfulness that is happening, and that's a whole nother podcast. I get that, but so I think the future is we need to keep shouting, we need to keep in the streets, we need to keep making our voices heard. I mean, I every day wear some sort of political t-shirt to work because I will not be complacent. I will not fall into the lull of complacency. We still have the need to burn down and rebuild our systems. Our systems are working as they were designed, and they were designed to oppress. And so we don't need those systems. We don't want those systems anymore. We need to rebuild. We need to destroy and rebuild. So I think we need to keep the movement in the streets. I think we need to keep raising our voices. We need to keep being heard. We can't let the loud minority shut us out. We need to have the rational voices be louder. And I really hope that people go vote. And I really hope that people pay attention to their local elections. And I really hope that people understand what's going on in their local communities, because that's where your power is.
Off of the sheets and into the streets. Hell yeah.
Exactly.
I could be misconstrued so badly. Anyway,
I don't know where
it's the modern day Republican Party. Off with the sheets and into the streets. Any other questions, guys? Y'all?
I just want to say thank you for coming on. This is a little bit below a blue check on Twitter.
We're not worthy.
Come on this
We're not worthy.
Ignorant podcast.
No, I thank you for having me on. It is not, there's no below, above. No. Listen, we are all human beings. We are all people, and we are all in this together. And what people I think lose sight of is that Tyler, see, now you got me going again. People think like,
no, that's what I want. That's what I want.
No, I want to be real for a second, because people don't talk to me like a normal human being, because they think, oh, you're a doctor. So, there are these things in their brain that happen because I'm a doctor. And like, I'm a human being, and I know that y'all know that, but let's keep being real with each other. Let's remember that we're all human beings sharing this planet, and we all need to help each other defeat the oppression that we're all experiencing in some way. Like, I wouldn't be here if we weren't all in like the same boat, right? We're all in the same boat somehow. And whether it's this aspect or that aspect, like, we are all fighting this oppressive regime that is happening. And I respect you all for doing that, because it's not easy, especially in the South. Oh my God. Like, there are people I'm afraid to look at funny here for fear that they will just report me to the Alabama licensing, whatever. Like, I'm not exaggerating. That's a reality. So,
yeah, my political opinions gained me the nickname of Pol Pot at work. So,
I mean, but that's the thing, is like, we cannot be silenced because of. I feel like there's so much hate, violence, and bigotry that makes us afraid to use our voices, and that's an effective strategy on their part. Really?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm all for hate and violence. I just don't like bigotry.
Yeah.
I hate racists and I want to do violent things to them, but I'm not a bigot.
The only difference between you and me is that your love for medicine turned you into a doctor. My love for pharmacology turned me into a drug addict.
Hey, I mean, we go our own paths.
Yeah. But see, we're all here now.
Right.
It all led us here to spread
We
the
talked
good
about
word.
we talked about not silencing voices. Y'all are silenced real quick. Kai, did you have something you want to say before we sign off? Also, we can't talk about boats anymore because Tommy almost died kayaking, so boats are canceled.
White people are canceled.
Listen.
So I would ask as my final thing, what do you think would be a good course of action for the most realistic change that people in your area or pretty much anybody in the United States or whatever, a realistic action that they can take as soon as possible to start changing these things?
Oh, I mean, I think getting involved in your local organizations, like just Google search the areas that you're interested in, the areas where you're interested in helping, and getting to know your representatives and people in your city on the city council, people in your legislature, and contacting them and saying, hey, I like what you're doing here. I'd like my voice to be heard over here. People think that our politicians, our legislators are untouchable. They are our employees. We are their bosses. And they will do whatever they want if they don't hear from us. And let's be honest, there are many who will do whatever they want anyway. But at least you get your foot in the door and you get your voice heard. And if you don't like what happens, then you know how to vote next round. So I would say definitely get involved in your local communities, your local organizations, kind of know who's working. Like if you're interested in climate change, where are the local organizations that are doing, outreach programs to schools for recycling or whatever, but like do something, be interested. Write an op-ed, write to your local newspaper. There are so many things that people can do that we're not doing because we think that it's impossible or it's a thing for somebody else to do. And what I would say is, if not you, then who? I mean, that's why I'm in Alabama. If it's not me, then who? Who's gonna come to Alabama and provide reproductive health care if not me?
I was going to ask Tommy if he has any last questions, but he's
Bye, Tommy.
He's run away. Oh, man. Tommy, you can cut this out later. Never mind. Anyway,
Tommy.
Doc, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. This has been a very informative episode. Definitely, you talk about climate change a lot, so in the next life, you're definitely going to be a climate scientist.
They won't listen to me then either. So, I mean,
That's your curse, to never be listed in the medical field that you're going to be in continuously.
Exactly. Who's
the scientific field.
Right. Who's that mythological person? Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I hope that we can do this again with other things. I think that, you're a rare voice in this culture. So I'm excited to be part of it.
I'm excited that Kai's still here. All right,
I won't be next time you mute me, but okay.
What? We have to mute when we're not talking. Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, under his eye. And at Dixieland, the proletariat believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons, those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, and self-determination for all oppressed peoples. Make sure to like, follow us, and subscribe to us on social media at Dixie Prole. We are coming to you from the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement, Montgomery, Alabama, as well as the United Kingdom. We'd also like to recognize we're recording on occupied land that rightfully belongs to the Muskogee Nation. Dr. Leah, thank you so much for coming on. I don't know where Tommy went. Kai somehow is still here. I'm a fat guy with a podcast. That's how I identify. And Tyler, send us off.
All right. Before I send us off, I just want to say thank a loud, unsilenceable woman for your existence, because that's how you got here. And that's how we'll keep people here. And good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll see y'all next time.
I was going to say, everyone has an Italian mother.